Hey everyone, welcome to an episode of the $1 Million Dad podcast. I am really excited today because we have a special guest from inside our community. We're going to start bringing you these live recorded sessions that we're doing inside of our community on our training calls. It's a little bit of a hybrid between like a member spotlight and then deep dives on their businesses. And what you guys are going to hear today is from one of our members, Hudson, who has what he would call a local remote cleaning company. So he isn't actually cleaning. He is coordinating the cleaning. And he right now is running a 6-figure cleaning business. On his way to 7 figures is the goal. And he's going to share with you for about a half hour here all the ins and outs, kind of his life story up until this point. There's a couple cool things that he gets to talk about that I was really excited about. Number one, talking about Google LSA. And then just the term local remote, I think is really cool. I think it's a good thing for everybody to think about when they're starting a business, because there's a lot of people that will be listening to this that maybe have a side hustle or maybe partially a business, like they're in it though. Maybe they're a plumber and they're actually doing the plumbing, but if it's not a virtual business, he won't refer to it as a virtual business, but he'll refer to it as local remote. I love that. And then what you'll hear is towards the end of this episode is at about 30 minutes in or so, we go directly into a Q&A exclusively for the $1 Million Dad community. So if you want to get access to that 30-minute Q&A where he actually dives deep on his pricing model, how he thinks about pricing, how he gets employees, some different marketing strategies that he uses pre and post job, just go to $1milliondollardads.co, click in the little upper right-hand corner, apply, and you'll get to schedule a call and see if it's a right fit for you. And then that way you'll get access to all these Q&A sessions where our members get to put guys like Hudson on the hot seat and ask them the questions that they're wondering about the business. So without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Back to another episode of our member spotlight podcast here. So these are going to be brand new, and these are going to be kind of a 30-minute Q&A podcast. We're going to get to put the spotlight on somebody that's in our community running a business, and really just dive deep, learning more about them. And then the really cool and unique part is after our 30-minute podcast here, we're going to get to go into Q&A for our members, member-led Q&A. So today's guest is Hudson. Hudson's a fellow Twitter friend, MDD OG, an MDD OG, and he runs a service-based business in Oregon. So I'm super excited to dive in more today, to learn, Hud, more about your kind of business, your background, and actually just like learn kind of tips of the trade. You're specific to cleaning right now, but I think there's a lot of things that I see you talk about that you can insert just whatever, power washing, HVAC, plumbing, whatever it may be, like things that you're working through and learning and tough breaks over the years. I think that anybody, whether they're in the cleaning or power washing or any type of business, can get a lot from it. So I thank you for, number one, being here. Number two, being a part of the community. I'm really looking forward to diving into this today, man.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, my background is a little varied because I have just an obsession with learning. So whether it's really relevant to me presently or not, if it's something that I don't know anything about it, I'll dig into it if it interests me. So I have kind of a wide variety of kind of surface level experience on a lot of different topics. And then there's some that I can speak pretty deeply on as well, but absolutely love local service-based businesses and being able to affect your local community directly.
Give me a second, like take a couple minutes and paint the picture of your kind of origin story, just to give everybody a little bit of a feel for your upbringing and how you got to where you're at today. I think that paints a really good picture to provide some context to understand like the filter that you now think through, right? Because we're just a culmination of all of our experiences over the course of our life. And that changes the way that our filter is. So I'm curious, how did you get to where you are today? Like take us back and give us that story.
Well, I grew up in New England. Didn't actually wind up finishing high school. Wound up working instead. I really enjoyed being able to go out and directly impact my outcome. Wound up going back to college a couple of years later. And I backpacked around the United States for about 2 years, doing anything from odd jobs to digital marketing and starting a little agency while I was on the road to pay the bills. I did survival camping for a while. So I would intentionally go out to the woods with almost nothing and stay out there for a week to 2 weeks at a time. Basic supplies that most people would probably feel very uncomfortable with. Through the traveling, I landed up in Alaska, and I found the West Coast, and I absolutely fell in love out here. And so once I kind of settled down a bit more, I got married. We wound up finding out that we were expecting our son, and I settled down out here. And at that time, I had a pretty good experience with being a tile contractor and flooring contractor. So I started my outfit out here and got that going. That turned very quickly into a very niche tile installation. I only worked on wet areas. I did inlays and medallions and very custom work. So I worked mainly off of referrals. A couple of years later, me and my wife wound up getting divorced, and I kept going with that. She's still in the area, and we co-parent our son, and that's actually amazing. Our relationship is way better now than it ever was. So absolutely incredible there. And she has 2 other babies, and we're all one kind of big crew almost. So that's really nice.
I got a question about the survival stuff for a second. You touched on that. I think that's fascinating. Like, there's nothing more primal than getting in the woods and having nothing and figuring it out, right? What lessons did you learn through that has kind of helped you in what you do today? I have a few things that I think of, like the immediate
your mind will get you farther than your body ever will. It didn't matter how tired I was, how beat down I felt. If I had the determination, and when you're in a tough situation like that, you need food or you need to finish making shelter because you know it's going to rain, you have no choice. And so it's like you can push your body so much further than you think you can. And your mind is so much more powerful than you give it credit for.
Yeah. On both ends of the spectrum too, right? Like your mind could also cut you short before your body would want to give up, right? I was thinking about this. I was on a run yesterday. I was on a tempo run, running at a pace that was faster than what my normal pace is, just to try to build the aerobic capacity for 5 miles. And for 4.73 of those miles, I wanted to tell myself 37 different ways that I could quit. But I knew,
reasons why and justifications and everything else in between.
Yeah. So it sounds like through your story, right? You tried a lot of different things. Number one, it's like that jumps out to me right away is you stopped at high school, before high school, and now you run companies, you run a business. So the correlation of go to school, get a good job, get a good degree, kind of threw that out the window, right? And maybe you're not a super bajillionaire right now, or you're not, you're not BlackRock venture capital, but it's interesting. You were able to, during that time, really figure out what you wanted in life and not afraid to try different things and quick pivot if you needed to pivot, right? So going from the flooring to the tile to the niche tile.
Yeah, I was very interested in trying a lot of different things, and jobs weren't so much as a means of income as they were a way to learn something. So I jumped into a job in a field that I knew nothing about so that I could find out how it worked. And so I'd wind up getting promoted and moved up fairly quickly because I always wanted to do more. And so, like, just because this is my job description, I want to figure out, okay, what's the supervisor doing? What's his supervisor doing? What's this person doing? How can I take a load off of them? And in turn, I learn more about the inner workings of that business or company or process that I didn't know before. And now
Mm.
I can apply it to so many other areas of my life.
Yeah, I like that. That's a tweet for you that I'm also going to send out. Is jobs are more about the experience versus the income. So that's a really good thought about that. I always like this idea of getting. I was talking to TJ about this morning. Getting a black belt skill set while keeping a white belt mindset, meaning going into things always with you're clearly somebody that just wants to continue to learn and learn as much as you possibly can, and also learning from different industries. We get so stuck in our silos at times, right? We get so stuck in insurance, real estate, stock market, roofing, HVAC, plumbing, where you can take experiences from all these different jobs that you've had and kind of bring them together. And like, there's nothing unique about a cleaning company, but there's something unique about your experiences in the past that you bring to your cleaning company, right? And nobody else can do that. So I think that's really cool. I'd love to talk a little bit about like what the company looks like today and kind of from starting to where you're at now, and then dive into some, like you said earlier, I'm an open book. I want to dive into some of the nitty gritty, some of the tactics, what you find really like that serves you really well, and some of the mistakes you made along the way. So kind of
Absolutely.
give us a high level overview of what you got now, and then let's dive into it a little bit, and get some tactics going.
So, high level overview about a good 80% of the work that we do is move in, move out, and tenant turnover. And so that's about 70-30 residential to commercial tenants. We do service a couple of the apartment communities in the area, always looking to pick up some more of those. Those are great. As well as work with some landlords. So we kind of service those on a semi-regular basis. A large portion of what we do, though, with being in a college town, is there's a ton of apartment turnovers. So that's been kind of our bread and butter up to this point. It's a bit higher ticket, longer days. The employees like that over recurring, where now you're doing multiple shorter visits. But you can't beat recurring revenue either. So our focus, definitely moving into the fall and winter, is really focusing more on the recurring clients, just to make sure that we can keep our cleaners busy during a little bit of the slowdown.
One of the things that you just mentioned is like finding your niche, like, right. So I think about this a lot when you got people out there specific to the real estate world. You got people that are all about apartment buildings. You got people that are all about mobile home parks. You got people that are all about contractor garages, whatever it may be, right? And I'm a big proponent of, you need to lean into where your network or niche is the strongest, right? So you happen to be in a college town. Now, is that something I'm curious, when you got into this business, did you know that right away, or did that kind of cultivate over time and you're kind of like, oh, this is something that I notice a pattern here? How did that come up for you?
Yeah, a pattern. A lot of the incoming leads were that. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. So when I first started, our first client was an apartment community, a commercial client.
So when you were like, this is part of the equation that
Before I was
doesn't,
even officially an LLC or business, I got this client.
right. And this is
I
part of the
just,
equation that never gets talked about enough. And it's really, it's a real part of it is luck. Like sometimes you just get lucky, and I'm sorry, but it's, it's part of it. Right. But
and so this was kind of forced luck, because I have built other businesses in the past. So and I had a digital marketing agency, a small one back in the day.
mhm.
Um, so all of these experiences culminated in me going on Twitter, seeing people talking about this independent contractor model, being like, well, shit, I can throw up a website. Took a day and a half or so. I built the website, put it live, and within a week, I got a call. Now, I did more than just put up a website. I also did local listings like Yelp, Thumbtack, Google My Business, Facebook, Instagram page. I did the steps, but I also had enough experience to fumble through making a website that would at least relay the message correctly. It wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but it did the job.
Yeah, and that leads me to a really good point, because there's somebody out there listening right now that has a really good paying job and they're looking to start a side hustle because they're sick of working in corporate America, right? And they are too scared to get started, or there's so many different ways they can get started. And one thing that you just mentioned is that you actually, prior to even having this company, like you didn't have any jobs yet, but you actually, what I would say is, sold air. You went out there and you created this website, you created a platform, and you started advertising. And what's the best way to see if there's a product market fit for what you're doing? Go out there.
That was exactly what that was, is I was trying to see how much demand there was in this area if I threw some fishing hooks out in the pond.
So where did you learn that from? And was there a place in your past that you took a different approach to that?
Yeah, I've come up with the business prior and it completely flopped and fell on its face because I had a business, I had a product, and nobody wanted it. So most of the time in the past 7 years or so, when there's been kind of a bigger opportunity or something like this, I fell into blockchain consulting for a couple of years. It just happened. That was another one of those where the product in market, I didn't come up with any of that. It chose me. So this was, I was putting out hooks into the water to see what kind of response I would get. If I got a couple of responses, then I felt confident putting more effort towards it. At this time, I was still doing a little bit of the blockchain consulting and finishing up the last client over there. And I was contemplating reopening and rebuilding my tile company. But before, that was based mainly on referral. And so my acquisition cost for advertising was extraordinarily high for how niche my actual service was. There was a lot of just general tile calls that were a complete waste on me. So I was looking for something that I could get acquisitions at a lower rate. I wanted to be able to secure more jobs. Maybe I had to get more jobs, but if I could get a higher volume for less money and I outsource the work, then I could scale that. So that's where I figured I would build the website, do a couple of listings. It took me a few days to kind of put everything together, and I put it out there. Within a week, I had that commercial client call me, and I went in, visited her the next day, and she was telling me she's been looking for a solid commercial company for over 2 years. Since she lost one of her amazing ones. And she's had some fill-ins and whatnot. But the only other company in the area that was a quote unquote professional company wanted to individually bid every single one of her turnovers. And that's not efficient for a property manager when they have 117 units. So now I give her a flat rate with a time allotment. Any dirty apartment that need to be turned over, it goes billed hourly after that at $65 an hour. That's super easy. She can plan. She sends off one email, tells me the unit, what date. She knows it's taken care of. So I solved the problem.
So historically, these service-based businesses are run by people who are really good at the task at hand, right? A plumbing company is usually started by somebody who's a very good plumber. A cleaning company is usually started by somebody who has a knack for cleaning and does a good job and enjoys it. Where you're competing in a market with no tech for a lot of it. for a lot of these old school type companies, so just at a bare bones minimum to put up a website and a Google My Business and to start trying to drive some traffic to it, it yields some pretty substantial results. I think that
there's no competition between some of the smaller mom and pops that have zero presence. And those are some of the people that I'm looking to hire. They have a couple of clients on their own. They're trying to fill in their schedule. So they're already professionals, already know what they're doing. They have their own supplies, but their schedule isn't quite full enough. So now they can turn over to me, just share their availability with me, and then I can start booking in their available days.
So let's dive into kind of the specifics, right? A little bit. What does the business currently look like to make up from, how many employees you have, how many jobs are they doing? Like, what if somebody was going to go today to try to start something like this in their market, right? Before you sell them your $997 course that we'll make available at the end. What does it look like today? And then like, what is the 12 month goal of like what you're building to?
Sure. So today, over the last month, we have lost over a dozen people. Now, that is primarily 3 people that were my rock stars. 1 got pregnant and 2 wound up moving out of state. They were a couple. So they worked independently, but they were both on the schedule. So that's one problem when you bring in one person and then they refer a friend or partner, is if one goes, you're at risk of losing more than one. Right. I got slapped in the face with that. And then the other side is I wound up trying to switch over to more of a W-2 model for experienced cleaners, and had a couple of pretty negative hires that I probably should have done a little bit more due diligence before giving them as much leash as they had. So I definitely take responsibility for that. Right now we have 4 independent cleaners, no W-2s, and we're doing roughly about 8,400 a month in gross.
Okay. And then for you, like, you're not actually out there cleaning, right? So this is the beauty of this model that you're setting up. I want to call it virtual, but I don't want to give it the negative the connotation of like virtual, where you're just not even there. You're there, but you're not the one with the pine saw in your hands.
Remote,
local remote. I like that. That's a really good local remote. I think you should coin that phrase. And if you don't within the next 8 seconds, I'm going to. But I think that's a really cool local remote job. I completely lost my train of thought where I was going with that. But one thing that did pop up is you talked about digital ads early on, having a digital agency and trying to find work. So what are some, if somebody doesn't have a lot of money, they're trying to start a local remote service company, what's some boots on the ground way that they can start to try to get some easy business? And after this, we're going to kind of go into more of the details in our closed community with some questions that we have here about employees and more numbers like that. But give us like the starting, if you were going to hand me a playbook with 10 plays on it or whatever, how would somebody get going?
Basic, absolute start. I mean, I knew how to build the website. Depending on your experience, that may be easier or harder for you. There's landing page type websites like Card out there where you can build a pretty easy 1-page website just to give yourself a presence. Don't overthink the logo. Try and use your location in the name. That helps with Google, and the domain. Those are 2 kind of bigger things that definitely help. But otherwise, you just need to set up, legally, you need to set up your LLC. Listings, Google My Business, Yelp, Thumbtack, Facebook and Instagram page if you want to do that. If you're not going to be consistent with it, don't do any of the social media. It helps. You can definitely get jobs from social media, but if you're not going to be consistent with it, at least just don't even bother, because it's just going to be a burden for you. You don't necessarily need it. And then try and get Google LSA. That's been one driving factor when it comes to incoming leads. You get your business license, your insurance, and get a Google My Business listing. And now you can turn on LSA once you have, I think it's like 5 reviews. And then you can adjust your budget accordingly. You can set specific areas. And these are people that are using Google.
Oh, Hud.
Sorry about that. I had a phone call. It's very intent-based searches. So these clients are ready to hire somebody. So when you pick up the phone, answer, take their call. And as long as you do answer the phone, that's one of the biggest things that every single one of these businesses struggles with. Like right now, I just ignored the call because we're recording. But generally speaking, it doesn't matter what's going on. Friends, family, the other. Currently, I take sales calls, and they know when that ring comes through, I'm going to step away real quick, and I'm going to answer the phone. Neil Parekh just did a little internal study, and his numbers were incredible. I think it was like 63% higher conversions when answering the call on the first ring versus calling back within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes. Just calling back, it doesn't matter how quick you are on the trigger, that can significantly lower your conversion. So that's really been my biggest thing, is every time that phone rings, I answer the call, or sometimes it'll slip past and I'm calling within 30 seconds because I want to get them back on the phone before they hit another call here on Google and get somebody else on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things. I mean, you talked a couple of things that stood out is stop wasting your time on social media, go to do something that a lot of people will spend a lot of time on social media because they think it's busy work and they think they're generating leads and stuff like that. But in the reality, you'd be way better off going and knocking on doors, right? And then also the simplicity of the most revolutionary thing that you can ever think of in business success is answer the phone, which is a wild
the damn phone every single time.
It's wild to think about, but like with us, we spend every lead that comes in for us. I mean, now in the real estate game, it's wildly different than cleaning, but it's a $300 lead. So if you don't answer that, you're throwing out $300 potentially every time you don't answer it, right? So we have a system set up where it comes into our call management system, and after 3 rings, it goes directly to an answering service that's on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're in the US, and then it's more expensive. We pay them per minute that they're on the phone with these people, but it's way more valuable than not having answered the phone. So I would encourage anybody who's listening to this, to try to think of that. Like early on, you're not going to have a lot of money, right? Potentially, you're potentially not going to have a lot of money or the resources. So you're going to have to answer the phone yourself. However, you get to a place where you want to continue to move, like Hud talked about, $8,400 gross a month. I'm sure his goal is to double, triple, or quadruple that in 12 to 24 months. And as that happens, he's going to have to continue to remove himself from those steps of the equations. But when that happens, he's going to also have to implement systems, either people or softwares, that replace him in those. So over time, you start to accumulate money, and you can pay for these systems so that the phone gets answered every single time. I think that's one of the key things here, man. So I really appreciate you diving into kind of the high level overview of your business, kind of what it would take to get started, what somebody can literally just lay it out, basically how somebody could start $100,000 a year gross revenue business, right? Just as in a local remote model, which I love that term so much. And
it took me a weekend to put everything together, and I mean, it doesn't take much effort to get this started as a side hustle and dip your toes in the water. Figure out
Yeah.
if you like it or not. And if it's for you, great, step on the gas. If not, you can easily find a couple independent contractors that'll take over any of your clients, and they would love to do so.
I love it. I love it. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to transition into our community Q&A. So those of you that are listening on the pod, really appreciate you being here. Another episode of the MDD podcast and one of our member spotlight episodes. It's super awesome. Hudson, thank you so much for being here. Now we're going to pop over to do some Q&A.